Welcome to the live stream of 2024 vice presidential debate between Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Ohio State Senator J.D. Vance. I'm Writer.
And I'm Thinker.
And we appreciate you guys coming with us live to react to this historic night, the one and only vice presidential debate, or in the sense, a defense and continuum of the presidential debate. That's what I'm assuming it's going to be. I could be proven wrong, but it seems like most of the times that they have vice presidential debates are just to continue what the other person said who's actually running. Thinker, what do you think we're going to see tonight?
I think that we're going to see a couple different things. I think that we're going to see a trying to tear down of the opponent from Vance, and I think we're going to see a pushing of Harris's policies from Walz.
Yep.
Say hello to Lola, everyone.
Hello, Lola. And if you could only, if you only could see the amount of absolute chaos that we endured before we actually hit the live button, it is.
Yeah.
I can't describe how chaotic these past 15, 20 minutes have been.
Yeah, it's
like you can. Yeah, like debate aside, like you can see like the fact that I had the moving lights behind me, my camera thought it was better. The lights were more interesting than focusing in on my face. So it's like, I'm going to focus on that. Fuck all of this blur. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now we got to make a decision here. But we're on it. Right. Kitty joins the live again. Yes, Ray. Ray, how's it going? Punk Rock Pollyanna. Always good to have you guys here. Really appreciated you guys being in the stream.
And we really appreciated you guys' input during the presidential debate as well. You guys brought up some very good questions, made some very good points.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay. So 2024 vice presidential debate. We are about 28 minutes removed from it. They're just showing coverage of the arena. Thinker, what else are we going to expect?
Well, if specifically we can expect J.D. Vance to attack Walz on his military record. That's been airing every day for the past week on Fox leading into the debate. They're well aware that is a point, a very, I guess you could consider a weakness, a chink in the armor for Walz. So they've been focusing pretty heavily on that. We can expect Vance to focus on that. We can again probably expect Walz to probably try and tie Vance to Project 2025, get him to talk or at least maybe slip up on some concept points. So it's going to be interesting. I know that this is probably the most interested I've ever been in a vice presidential debate. To be honest,
I mean, honestly, I think it's probably like the most interested anybody's ever been in a vice presidential debate. Because it's never been so close. Let me just interject real quick and remind people that tonight, all tips and all proceeds that happen through super chats, through leaving us tips. If you like what you see, please guys leave a tip. We appreciate it. Usually every single cent goes right back into the channel and right back into what we do. However, every single bit of proceeds tonight will go to AmeriCare's disaster relief for those affected by Hurricane Helene. It's been horrific. Over 4 million people without power, over 100 dead at this point, and still counting. It's unbelievable.
Yep. I have an aunt that lives in Florida, and she got very lucky. She lives on an island just off the coast, and she lives at the pinnacle. So she got lucky. She didn't have to deal with any of the storm surge. So, but she's said that it's pretty rough over there. So again, Anything
And
you
dude,
guys
like,
are anything you
yeah,
guys are willing, any donations you guys are willing to make is going to go right back to helping all those people in Florida.
yep, and not just towards Thinker's one aunt. They will go to everybody.
Yes. Yeah. No. 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 I'm sure
That being said,
she's fine.
yeah. So Ray, thank you so much for your membership. Punk Rock Pollyanna, thank you so much for your $10 donation. It really goes a long way. We really appreciate it. We're gonna try to reignite some magnanimity back into this bleak world and this experience that we might see with this next hour and a half. Is it about an hour and a half? I think it goes around the same time to 10:30, right?
Like, yeah, roughly around 10:30.
And you got to work later, right?
Yeah, so I will be ducking out of the stream a little early, guys, but
Uh-huh.
I'm happy to be here. I always enjoy hanging out with Thinker, or I'm Thinker, hanging out with Writer and you
Narcissist.
and just just call me anyway. And I enjoy hanging out with you guys in the stream
Mm.
as well, and hearing you guys' points and uh what you guys' thoughts are on all of this.
Yeah. All right. Now, all right, we got about 23 and a half minutes. They're just interviewing people at this point. Um, is there any, I don't know, is there any, we've been hearing constantly this entire week that Tim Walz naturally comes in at a disadvantage, right? Because he doesn't have the experience, he doesn't have a lot of great debate work under his belt. JD Vance literally did media relations in Iraq. So how do they battle it out?
Um, I mean, I personally, and this is just my thought on it, I think that as
Wow.
I think Walz's first thought needs to be, you know, find an avenue of attack, because you know that they're going to be coming. You know that JD Vance is going to be coming after you. That has
Mm-hmm.
been that's been projected into the media all week. They know it's coming, and I have to
Yeah.
imagine. And Pete Buttigieg was the one prepping him for this, and
Yep.
I'm sure, and I have a lot of faith in Pete Buttigieg.
Cool. All
He's a
right.
very intelligent man, very smart, and I my advice to Walls is I hope you paid attention in prep, because this is gonna be a challenge. But as long as he's prepped well and has been prepped well, I think he'll do fine.
Now I'm trying to find who Vance's debate coach. Does anybody know that? Vance's debate
I
coach.
I can't think of who it was either, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I don't remember them saying. I mean, they propped up
I
Buttigieg a
mean,
lot.
Trump's campaign has never been huge on debate prep to begin with. It's a little bit different with Vance, again, because he's not exactly like Trump. I think that he puts a little bit more, maybe a little bit more of his stock into prepping for these sort of things.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
so I think
I
it
don't
really
know.
does just come down to making sure that Walls has an avenue of attack that's effective. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing if he's just attack, but he
Yep.
he needs to make sure that whatever he's attacking with is something that's going to stick. Because unfortunately, Walz's military service, the argument that the Vance is about to make on that, it has a high probability of sticking.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a message that reads well with a certain demographic of America.
Yeah. All right. So
Being a military guy, I understand that that was a lot of semantics. If you
mm-hmm.
want to look at the specifics of it, you know, I don't think anybody who's been in the military looks at a 24 year service and says that guy is, a traitor. And I don't know if you've heard about this, writer, but there's talk about him Vance coming in and calling him Traitor Tim.
So I heard that. I'm like, are we really at the point where it's not just
Well,
Trump
you
who
know
is
Trump,
like,
the Trump campaign loves their nicknames.
but like I just like what does it I mean it's reductionism at its finest. Like it's reducing us to these catchy 1 to 2 phrase like names, and I was like, dude, like this is what high school was all about. And like that's
Yeah.
the thing that's like so mind numbing. It's like
It's
whenever
high
I
school name calling.
like I don't know who to blame more. It's whether it's the politicians who are actually coming up with them or the people who regurgitate it and echo it after. Because at this point, I'm like, you're just parroting it. It almost feels like you're patronizing me because you tell me that I'm incapable of
Yeah.
digesting a complex topic. You just have
Yeah.
to put it into an elevator pitch. And as a screenwriter, I know all about elevator pitches, but they're to
Yeah.
get you interested in
Yep.
more. This is the end of the conversation by just saying Trader Tim,
It's
Trader Tampon Tim. How do you say is it a trader or is it a tampon? Is the
yeah.
tampon a trader or is he the trader? Did the because
um
I just
well,
stolen tampon valor.
it's marketing. It's marketing. Like what do companies do when they make commercials?
Mm,
They come
yeah,
up with a catchy slogan or
yeah,
a catchy catchphrase or
mm,
a catchy jingle.
yeah,
Trump, if he understands anything, understands the value of making something catchy.
yeah. Um,
So I mean, he was
so
able to turn like a small portion of America into a pretty
yep,
large base using that
yep.
tactic.
Hmm. So apparently, so Representative Tom Emmer, who hails from GOP Representative Tom Emmer, who hails from Minnesota, is standing in for Tim Walz in Vance's debate prep. So nobody
Now,
majorly notable. So
logic
yeah,
would tell me that they would pick that guy's maybe because he's maybe slightly more uh, liberal and maybe is able to argue with a little bit more liberal views, giving Vance a better.
he's a GOP rep from Minnesota.
Oh,
He's a Republican
well,
rep. So what that tells me is that if they're picking a Minnesota GOP representative, that tells me that Vance plans on attacking Walz at home. He plans on
yeah,
attacking the tampon issue, the free school lunches, which he has deemed as socialism. He plans on
yeah,
attacking the Black Lives Matter response,
yeah.
right? I mean, like it sounds like it's tailor made to find the best defense from a Minnesotan
Yeah,
and
yeah.
attack that.
Get the inside guy to come in and
Mm.
tell you all the dirty secrets. You know.
Because other than that, like, what else do you have to like? Now, here's the thing. Like, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think? Do you think it makes more sense to spend the majority of the time because we know we're going to spend both time on two separate I guess 2 separate attack points. Do you spend more time attacking like each VP candidate, or do you spend more time attacking the actual top of the ticket? Like, do you spend more time like tying Walz to Kamala and Biden, or do you spend more time
Well,
tying Vance to Project 2025 and Trump?
I think I guess that's really the balancing act is because they have an easy attack with
Hmm.
Walls. They
Yeah,
have an easy avenue to go after him.
yeah,
However, Walls at the end of the day is not the one at the top of the ticket.
yeah.
And so I honestly, if I'm prepping for this debate as a Republican,
Hmm.
I'm not 100% sure what I would want to do because
Yeah,
it is very easy to go after Walls, but he's not at the top of the ticket. But the Harris is not. It's their attacks against Harris have not been as effective as they have wanted them to be. They've had a
yeah,
little bit of success with the immigration specifically, but
yeah.
I don't think any of the attacks they've sent at her have been as effective as they've wanted them to be. So
Yeah.
my guess, probably go after Walls and try and undercut Harris by bringing down her VP
Yeah,
candidate and try and
yeah.
tie her to him in a way that makes it look like she's somehow
Yeah.
complicit in
Mm.
the way
S-
that he operates.
Yeah.
Maybe tack some of his more liberal views onto her more liberal views, like you were mentioning the free school
Mm.
lunches. maybe use that as a springboard to attach her to this far left idea, you know? So, but I don't think that I guess my conclusion is that I don't think that they would probably go after Harris. I think that they would try to attack Harris through Walz, because I think that that's the easiest avenue that they have, instead of going after Harris's the specific policies that she's handed down.
Well, I'm actually going to counter you on that one. So I think the easiest way to keep the other on the defense is to almost act as if the VP opponent isn't even there. Go straight for Harris or go straight for Trump, and then that keeps your opponent constantly on the defense. Now, if Vance knows that Walz isn't good at debating, then you could just constantly keep him on the defense by attacking Harris, forcing him to defend the project or defend the policies. Conversely, if you constantly, because Vance is very good at reducing, he talks, I don't want to say he talks like a normal person. He doesn't talk normally in a donut shop. He doesn't talk normally in a rally, on a debate stage. But on a debate stage, the guy was in media relations in Iraq. He's been debating. He's a Yale law grad. He is good at debates. He can reduce Trump's rhetoric down to a more digestible level to the undecided person who's just come listening in for the first time. And because of that, he is more capable at downplaying what Trump is planning on doing. So if your Walz, go straight for Trump and force JD to defend it.
And and to your point about being relatable, I think they both share that strength. I think that one of Walz's biggest successes this entire campaign is his relatability. His favorable rating is through the roof, and that's not just amongst Democrats. There are a lot of undecided voters who really like him because he's relatable. And I think I think that he should do the exact. Well, honestly, you might be right. You may have persuaded me here, because because if you think about it, if it's going straight toward each other's top of the ticket, you have Vance, who is able to, as you said, using his media relations experience, make Trump's or Harris's policies negative or positive, respectively. Using that. However, Walz has the exact same ability. Walz has been able to boil things down to a relatable and understandable level this entire campaign. So if I'm Walz, I think you're right. I think if I'm Walz, I go straight at Trump and I start to attack these policies in a way that makes them relatable. Lets people understand, because people still do not understand that tariffs are not good for Americans. And I think, honestly, if anybody can get that point across, Walz would be able to do that.
Now,
because he's relatable. I think that this is the Harris campaign, the Harris-Walz campaign's chance to get at least maybe even if they just make people understand the point on tariffs, it's been a successful debate, in my opinion, because that fact has been so misunderstood this entire campaign. And that's what's pulling a majority of the people undecided whose concern is the economy. That are the ones where that's their concern, who are pulling towards Trump. That's the reason, is that because he keeps saying, "Oh, well, he's gonna make them pay for everything." But if he's able to impress and make people understand that that's not what tariffs do, I think that this has been a successful debate.
What do you think the odds are? I can see you're catching yourself from continuing. You're like,
sorry.
you're like talk.
No,
No,
but what made me
it's
think
fine.
you like this was you put a very new idea in my head, and I'm having all these crazy thoughts now. I'm like, oh, that could go that way. So
I
yeah.
know, but it's so funny. Like I'm literally watching you on the screen, and I'm sure like the audience is too. You're like, because you have all these great points, and then you're like, oh yeah, breathing at the very end. And I'm like, oh shit. Okay, what do you think the odds are? If you want to talk about relatability, what do you think the odds are that he brings up his personal IVF story again? Because he brought it up once at the debate or at the DNC.
I would be very surprised if he doesn't, because that is a very good segue into the conversation about what one of the topics that is the Democratic Party's strongest issue, which is abortion rights, and it's not exactly abortion, like related to abortion, but it's tangential, it's right next to it. So I think that would be a very good segue into attacking Trump on his abortion ban, and I don't know if he should spend too much time on the abortion thing, though, only because most of the people where that is an issue, I would imagine, have decided who they're going to vote for in that regard. So I think that really what they need, what the Harris Walz campaign and what Walz needs to do is focus on the issues that they've had problems with, and that is the economy and immigration, if you can swing it. Immigration's the tough one. Republicans have had that pretty locked down for a while.
Well, what'll happen
again, if he's able to just flip the economy issue, great.
Well, what'll happen is, if you're on the Republican side, you turn abortion into immigration, and if you're a Democrat, you turn immigration into abortion. You find a way to link the two, and you just pivot. That's probably what we're going to see here. Now, what do you think? What do you think? Hey, thanks for subscribing, Arturo Gijon Cortez. Oh my God, I gotta get up on my Spanish. I went to a Mexican bar the other day, and I was trying so hard to speak fluently. It was so good years ago. I don't know what happened. I had like no practice, and I could barely get out like the word like yo entiendo, which is I understand. So that's not a good start. I'm like, man, like this is not good. I got to get up on it. I got to get back into like, where's my I had Rosetta Stone for the longest time. Like
I am self-aware enough to know that a foreign language is not in the books for me.
Dude, politics at this point is a foreign language.
Oh, you're telling me.
Now, do you think it's helpful
to catch up on something?
Yeah. All right. Now let me ask you, do you think it's helpful if Duolingo, yeah, that's a good one. We should do Duolingo. Do you think it's helpful in any way for Walz to bring up Vance's past positions on Trump? Do you think that does anything?
For Walz to bring up Vance's past positions on Trump?
Because 2016, I even think all the way up, yeah.
I do believe that it would be. I'm just worried about how effective it would be, because that's been thrown out there. Well, maybe not by the people that on the media organizations on the right really haven't been reporting that. So maybe not.
The only way I can see that this like possibly working is if you know that your opponent is better at you than something, then you frame everything that they say as, this kid who just wants to fit in. That J.D. Vance went from this guy who was so vehemently and passionately against Trump to being in the pocket of right-wing corporate tech oligarchs to being with Trump. And the very guy who we called America's Hitler, if you
Yeah.
wanted to, if you wanted to take one of the main ways I think that he could take down Vance is that if he framed him as this kid who just wants to fit in and everything he says is just to appease one person his entire life. And you can look at JD Vance and say, hey, this is a guy who will do and say anything to get to the top. And everything you're hearing from him now is him in action doing that.
And I just had a thought on that. That would actually be a great segue into Trump and attacking Trump on the fact that Trump, he tends to just take on whatever group is in front of him. You know,
Yeah.
Trump is just a bigger version of Vance in that regard, where he will say and do anything to be accepted. And and I think that if they've prepped well and that attack comes up, he can attack Vance and then springboard from that attack into an attack against Trump on a larger scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he said that he tried to listen to what Trump had to say and that everything changed afterwards and his opinion changed because of Trump. And I'm like, and I'm hard pressed to see that other than the fact that Vance voted for the corporate tax cut. And I mean, I really hope, you want to talk about bingo cards. By the way, everybody, bingo cards, get your bingo card up. Punk Rock Pollyanna already put hers up. I got mine. Where is mine? If you haven't seen the list is on YouTube. What I got right now, I got Black Lives Matter, IVF, Mammal, Combat, Home Buyers, Tariffs, Fear Mongering, Project 2025, 15%, and one mispronunciation of Kamala. Thinker, I think you're still thinking about it.
I had it all. I saw the list. I picked them all out. Didn't write them down. So now
awesome.
I don't remember what I
guess
picked.
That's why I'm writer.
Well, it's again, it harkens back to the chaos before stream.
Oh my God. Like, we're lucky that the lights are still on in both of our rooms right now. All right. We got about 3 minutes until the vice presidential debate officially begins. I know it's like a little cliche to be talking about this, but man, we are literally living through history. Like, I don't know if you've thought about that much, like in this, while being so vehemently entrenched in politics day by day, as you and I so often are, to the point where we are creating a podcast, and episode 1 will be going out this Friday. It's called the In Defense of the Fence podcast. Thinker, do you want to talk a little bit about what that is?
It's a podcast for people that are on the fence, undecideds, that just want to make a little bit more sense of everything going on. The focus of the podcast is facts above all else. So, we try to stay as objective as we possibly can because we want you guys to have the facts. We don't want you guys to be getting bombarded with misinformation at every turn, which is what the news media is right now. So we just want you guys, we're going to present different topics every week, and we just want to present the facts about those topics. And we're both going to spend our time researching and fact checking and hearing what each side has said and fact checking what they've said to see if that is in fact the truth. We're doing a lot of work so that other people might be able to have a better understanding of what's going on, because this is
Tim Walz is on the stage.
All right,
waiting. Now, if for any other reason my head, I don't know if it matters. Oh, JD Vance is here.
Oh boy.
Oh, go boy. All right, here we go. The debate is underway. 1 minute. They're writing things down. It's like Final Jeopardy at this moment. Now, I don't know if I don't know if I'm a little biased here, but my head is somehow a little cold. I need to.
I think I do believe that we are watching on different networks, unfortunately, because our again, going back to the chaos, our original streaming platform that we were going to watch this on was chaotic, so we ended up having to choose different streaming platforms. So our Our audios are not going to sync, are not going to match up, but we will both be seeing the same thing.
Oh, if he says Ohio State, I'm going to put my Michigan hat back on. Because go blue. Because I don't care if this is politics. College football matters way more.
Now, minute for you? Less than?
Oh, I'm at 10 seconds.
Oh, crap.
Dear God. Oh, my God. All right.
Oh, wait.
Well,
nope, they're going over now.
Okay.
Democratic Governor.
There we go.
That's right. It is also potentially, if you haven't noticed, possibly the last debate we will see before.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. Get your bingo cards in now. Get your predictions in. Let's get to the discussion.
You're on NBC, but tonight's event is hosted by CBS News in their studio in New York, just a few blocks from here.
Yeah, and as the last debate was between the running mates Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, there's no audience in there tonight. So each candidate is going to have 2 minutes for their answers, and then there's a rebuttal. And the moderators have said, Lester, there will be some fact checking, but they're really counting on the candidates to fact check each other.
And as we noted, unlike the last debate, microphones will not be muted, but the network says they reserve the right to mute the candidates. So that'll be an interesting process as they go along.
Okay, the vice presidential debate about to be on. Let's go to CBS Network Studios, West 57th, here in the heart of Manhattan, and watch this debate.
Presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS
Okay, so you and I are only apart by a few seconds here.
Okay.
On CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance.
God, he even stands like a porcelain doll.
No.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so the candidates need to do their own fact checking,
Which is what they should have done in ABC.
Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding.
Punk Rock, I'm on Disney Plus.
Americans are.
and I am on Peacock through NBC.
And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defense.
Starting with foreign policy, my favorite.
Has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability.
That's not a good start.
Which is back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this
moment. All right. So side-swiping Vance and just going after Trump, pretty much what we talked about.
His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance.
There it is, bringing up past comments that Vance made.
Is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see,
do you see what Vance is doing?
Towards Vladimir
Putin, the opposite of Trump. He is locked on to Walz.
Yeah. Coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today, we will protect our forces.
They trained him in these side-by-side shots.
Consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working-class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required...
God damn it, he didn't say Mama.
And she raised me in part because my mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I listed.
It strike you as weird that he's talking about himself when asked a question about
gratitude for this country, for the American
Iran.
Made it possible for me to live my dreams.
You've only got 2 minutes.
I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American
dream. Oh yeah, they're not going to talk about foreign policy. I mean, 90 minutes. He was never going to talk about the answer the question.
Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy
Kamala Harris administration.
Against their allies, and God forbid, potentially, launching against the United
States. The goal
States.
Is to just go straight for the presidential candidate.
To fear the United States, you needed
this is just like a cheerleader battle. I mean, this is what this has always been.
Line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting.
All right, so a clear pro-Israel stance.
To take with the Israel question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something the Governor Walz just said is extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. And the answer is
I find it incredibly ironic that the people who blame the vice president for not doing anything are running for vice president, who very clearly know how much the vice president position is a figurehead.
Yeah, and Trump's own campaign has said that the vice president doesn't matter.
Of course he doesn't.
So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart.
I agree, Ray. I absolutely agree.
I think one of the hardest things is, I think because Walz doesn't have foreign policy experience, I think this is his hardest topic. So maybe they frame foreign policy because they knew that like this was a topic that is hard for either people.
To get to. Nora, Margaret, thank you. Let's turn
Walz
now to
seems a little bit
Helene.
uncomfortable, though, I will say,
Could
with
become
foreign
one of
policy.
the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45
Gotta take notes.
taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. And Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. But let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well,
That's an interesting way.
All those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors. If we work together on these emergency management governors, no partisanship. They work together to solve the governors and the emergency responders on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now,
right, and this is where you get into talking about the dismantling of NOAA Project 2025.
We've seen in the
And
has created jobs all across the
I'm
country.
interested in seeing if he actually does. This would be the perfect time to do it, but
the technology
we'll
that we
see.
invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts.
Would you consider this defense or offense, Thinker?
But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest
Would you
soybeans,
consider this defense or offense
producing more
right now?
natural gas and more oil at any time we ever had. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real.
I'm not sure.
Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice.
This is a lot more policy heavy than I was expecting it to be.
Across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Walz is definitely getting more comfortable.
Opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned.
I wonder what his notes are. I really want to know.
To agree.
It's like, let me finish my drawing.
Said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy
everybody
production
drinking
in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, so there's something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Natural gas, we got to invest more.
To be fair, we've never had more natural gas in this country than we do now.
Yeah.
The only possible way to do more of that is either more offshore drilling or reducing the restrictions on national parks, which is another thing that they've considered as well.
These are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax.
This is what I wanted him to do. Talk about the specifics.
Say, give me money.
Now, this is offense.
And I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work?
Here we go.
For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing.
Do you think they talk about the immigration, the border bill that they had on the floor?
The asylum fraud.
I'm sure they do.
System that has opened the floodgates, and what it's meant is that
I don't know if it's a good idea, but I'm sure they do.
Who struggle with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance.
And Chad, I only say that because that's been their talking point this entire thing. I think they need a different avenue of attack.
build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens.
We've actually got 9, but it's okay.
I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportation.
But again, how do you find them?
And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers. Who
but again, also, it's only 3.9% of foreign-born people here.
Margaret, as you asked about family separation, right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them, hopefully, are.
If they're lost, how do you know they've been sex trafficked? This is the entire flaw to the argument: is that if you know that they're lost, you don't know anything about where they went.
Harris's wide open southern border. And I ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that.
I think Ray, I'd speak for all of us and say we all love the word tangential. We love
specific allegations, including that the vice president is quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things, regarding children.
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history. 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do.
Of his own state.
Let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state, a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration.
There it is.
Nation scene. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Langford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle. Wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents. Detection for drugs. DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no.
Wow, he said
because it gives him a
personalizing this. That's something I didn't expect.
Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things, and they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years.
I was going to say, where is the referendum on, like, this should be a referendum on both policies. I mean, like, if 4 years on what his plans on immigration were.
And Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do.
It's okay, Ray. Sometimes Tim makes us want to dance.
Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country, and we know that they use.
Mine's a Red Bull, though.
It is a disgrace, and it has to stop.
Oh, you had an upper. I got a straight downer.
For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country.
That is not true. We have not had a record number of border crossings.
She says that somehow
we have not.
And cared a lot about a piece of legislation.
Not even close, I don't think.
The thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar.
I should have put czar on the bingo card. I should have known.
Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health.
He didn't answer why Trump killed that bill, though.
Right. I don't think they've said any of the terms from the bingo card yet. Wow, they are good. Ain't nobody getting a hoodie tonight.
Mass deportations.
Look, we fix this issue. with a bill that is necessary. But the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this.
Oh, damn. He came so close to fear mongering. He
Oh
came
God,
so close to fear mongering with demonizing.
He's acting like the disappointed teacher that writes like do better, like push yourself.
Come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue.
Yeah, that's right. You're right, Polyrock.
The governor had to send
Well, the drink is strong.
to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim, Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but I
think it's fair to say that Walz is fairly broken in now. He's warmed up.
And I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that.
Oh, thank God, Angie. I can do Angie. The alcohol will let me do Angie.
You disagree that Congress controls the purse strings
Thank
to support
God.
many of the changes that you would
right
actually want to implement. You have 1 minute.
Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are.
But that's what the bill was doing, was empowering law enforcement.
They just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the.
Walz laid out exactly how it was empowering them.
To say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico. You've got to go back through proper channels. Governor Walz brought up the community.
This feels like longer than a minute.
Worried about the things that I said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio.
Son of a bitch. Here we go.
You've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that
This is an open door. I hope Walz sees that, though.
Because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue.
That was one way to attack it, Tim, but there was a much bigger attack you could have made there.
Do you think it was a strategic move to not go into the Springfield debate?
Probably. I think they're taking the opportunity to explain the bill again to try and press the importance of that bill.
Now, to that point, do you think that the Springfield comments by Vance was bait?
American principles. Look,
I'm sorry, I missed a lot. What was that?
Do you think Vance was trying to bait Walz by bringing up Springfield?
I think that's true.
I don't know. Maybe
Simply,
I don't want to speculate.
this bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected.
Why? Why would you bring that up?
We have so much to get to.
I think it's important because
Why would you bring that up, though?
the rules were that you guys were going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Why?
So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave.
That's not why they're on temporary status.
A person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank you, Senator,
No.
for describing the legal process.
Oh my God, no! What are they doing?
I will say I think CBS is going to get some shit for this.
Oh God, yes.
Gentlemen,
Why would you?
your mics are cut? We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal
I don't
process.
know.
Nora, thank you, Margaret.
I don't know. This kind of took a
I
turn.
really wish they hadn't have done that.
Each of your
Yeah.
campaigns released an economic plan, so let's talk about
God.
the specifics.
Do you think that's because
I have a lot to say about that? I don't want to get into it right now because there's a lot in my head and I don't want to talk over.
Let's wait for the break.
By $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is one is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more housing in Minneapolis. Prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts.
He's really pushing the continuation of the Kamala policy to the everyman.
Reduces
Yeah.
childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference.
He's doing exactly what I wanted him to do, which was break down the policies in a digestible way that the layman can understand it.
$8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it. It would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession.
Yep.
Look, this is
I agree, Angie.
Absolutely.
For sure.
They shouldn't have fact checked, period. I don't think.
When you do that, our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis.
Oh my God.
And says it would increase the nation's.
They're going to get so much flack for this. They brought up the Wharton analysis. That's Trump's school.
I'll give you 2 minutes.
Saying that
First of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening. You just heard it in the answer. A lot of
they're going to get so much shit for this. It's going to look like
it even sounds pretty good.
They're trying to help Walz against it. That's going to be the coverage after
because
this.
She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher.
The vice president doesn't do anything.
60%. Do
you think it's outside the norm?
I get very tired of this narrative. I get so tired of hearing this.
Do you think it's outside the norm to, like, on a vice presidential stage, like debate stage, just look straight down the barrel of the camera and say, look, we don't do shit. Like, I'm just here to break ties in the Senate. Other than that, I'm in Bali getting a tan.
Yeah.
Attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies to deliver the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security.
That's the first time I've seen him throw out a number, like a fact, like a number that might actually sound like it could be fact-checked and possibly true.
That they want to undo the Trump tax cuts, but if you look at what was so different,
I don't think so. I don't think we've heard him yet. I think if anybody understands that it's Kamala to go after, it's Vance.
Passed in 2017, and you saw.
And no, I don't think we've heard Biden's name yet at all.
Generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on. And
now here's the thing, though, and if Walz is smart, he'll capitalize on it. The reason why people brought home more money is because Trump rode the wave of an economic bull run ever since Obama.
Yeah.
Is he going to respond to it?
Do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it's the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts said this. I made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted.
Wear a little bit more time to read the comments.
You don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, in the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle
globalization did make things cheaper.
They were wrong.
It was the bringing manufacturing jobs home that made it expensive, which is exactly why they propped so much into Carrier in Indiana, and then Carrier went to Mexico.
It did.
For the first
I don't.
Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to
And it made things cheaper.
Here's the thing.
There's so much there. It's a circular argument that comes back and bites itself in the ass if you follow it.
Oh, he's bringing up his family.
Kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much. And I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs.
Why? Why? Okay.
I hope they're in bed because my wife, who stays at home and never leaves the house, will be putting them to bed at perchance.
And children shouldn't know anything about politics. This is adult stuff.
My naturally born, naturally non-donut infused children will have been gone to bed in their sleep cycle for 2 hours since post haste.
On this, I'm not a guy who wanted to ship.
We really do try to remain objective, people. It's just they make it so hard. They make it so hard.
But I'm a comedian at heart, and when shit is funny and they say it's so hard.
Largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit.
I really appreciate how concise and like to the point Walz is. He doesn't seem to be stumbling over anything.
The first minute was rough, and now it's been
rough, but
not bad.
He's on a roll. I don't think he's stumbled over anything.
Just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which is made
Punk rock Pollyanna could not have said it better myself.
Wine makes everything a run-on sentence.
Going to medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better.
Did you see that? Did you see Walz turn when he said that?
We have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor,
Please.
Thank you, Margaret.
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the street lights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China.
What do you think?
5 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home.
Waiting for him to finish his.
To take young people there. We would take basketball teams.
It's a very hard pivot.
We would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to
honestly, Angie, I think CBS kind of needs it to salvage a little bit of their nonpartisanism right now.
It's always been about that. Those same people,
the hard pivots always make me laugh. Like, thank you for your question on immigration. Did you know the sky is blue?
Bipartisan people working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits, and then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything.
This is my fiance, everybody.
A lot. I will get caught up in
Also watching debate.
But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques.
He just said he just admitted that he might get caught up in the rhetoric.
On one of those trips with us. I guarantee you, he wouldn't be.
I mean,
if
they push him on it, he could just say that he called him weird and the couch thing. But
so this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your
fiance getting a shout out.
Through teaching, which I was good at, whether it was being a good soldier or it was being a good member of Congress. Those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. So
that was rough.
In 2016,
that was rough.
Your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said
okay, hard pivot into.
You said you've been asked many times, and you said you regret those comments. And
I muted myself.
God damn it. For Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy.
You gotta admit that it was only a matter of time before they found a good way to spin this.
And yeah, when you screw up,
by pinning it on the media and saying, I changed my mind about Donald Trump, and you, the undecided voter, can too.
Interviews because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people.
And unfortunately,
they keep bringing it up. It was only a matter of time before they had some sort of pivot.
Unfortunately, I think they were going to use this as a springboard to say, see, here in the Republican Party, we admit when we're wrong about things. Unlike Harris, take her fracking answer in her debate as example.
High-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we
tariffs. Anybody's got tariffs on their bingo card.
Been a little bit
there's so much more we could have done more. So really wanting to impeach him because he asked for quid pro quo from Ukraine, but that's okay. But there's so much more that could be done. Yes, there is so much more that could be done, like Project 2025.
One thing, And you're probably surprised.
Which again, he's laying out the argument for removing establishment politicians and replacing them with loyalists.
American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one
Taxleaf.
issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration. It's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora, thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive
This
states
is a very
when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said
very important topic in this household.
Let me see. Let's see if Vance pivots this back to either immigration or, yeah, probably immigration or the economy.
This issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child, raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get
Project 2025 bingo card.
If not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is.
I was wondering where
we have seen
the fear of Project 2025 was going to come in. It is polled as the least popular policy in recent memory.
In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it. I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And
where are you going with this?
One of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight. And I love you. And she told
Are you telling me that a free piece of merch from my merch store is not worth democracy?
And I think that what I take from that as a Republican,
I have no words. I have
protect innocent life in this country who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us.
Well, that's an interesting.
Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically,
options and autonomy are not the same thing.
And it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions. Let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Well, when you spread rumors about your own citizens being here illegally eating pets, it tends to kind of make things a little bit messy.
Wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance.
That's an excellent argument.
She would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject, and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned
That was good. That was a good way to end that. Is like, okay, you believe that, but the person who's going to be making all the decisions doesn't.
If someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Thank you guys for joining the stream. If you're new to this, any tips or super chats will go straight to AmeriCares, a disaster relief fund for those affected by Hurricane Helene down on the East Coast and down south. So anything you can contribute would be greatly appreciated. We thank you all for being here.
The Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state, the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but
you can see it in the sky blue, vengeful eyes.
That's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber.
You can tell that J.D. Vance keeps looking up at the time clock whenever his opponent is talking.
Yeah.
Should still be alive. And there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe
not for nothing, but the change in tone from this debate to the other one, I feel like I'm watching like a PBS
law. The statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care.
Oh, wow. Why would you go into this realm?
I think that's pro-choice or pro-abortion. That is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because
but you know, this is always what was going to happen. The vice presidential debate always been cleanup crew for the presidential debate. It always is for the presidential rhetoric. Trump can say anything and there will be cleanup crew. Pence did the same thing in 2015.
Simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong?
Not the way the law is written. Look, I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation.
He didn't take the bait. That's good.
Women to get involved. Good. I use this line on this. Just mind your own business. On this, things work best.
God, I should have put mind your own business on there too.
Restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't.
If I put half these things on, I'd have no merch.
Funding for children, it doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education.
Dan McLeod, thanks for subscribing. We appreciate you having here.
We're going to do all these other things.
Welcome.
You're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So yeah, fact checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back.
Okay, taking a quick break. Thinker, thoughts, what do you got?
Oh my God.
So much.
Well, as far as CBS goes, what the hell
What
was
the
that?
fuck?
Why would you do
Good God.
that?
Can you mute that, by the way?
Oh, yes. The people are probably like, what the hell is going on in there?
I just need you to know that the slogan on the commercial that just popped up in the interim was "Screaming Encouraged."
Yeah. Don't worry. It's already provided.
No, I don't understand what the moderators were doing there with Vance. And giving it's one thing to fact check when we didn't want you to fact check. It's another thing to come back with an attitude.
Yeah. That's going to be clipped until election day.
And it bothers me every time. The reason it bothers me when they do that is it feels like it takes something away from the candidate on the other side of that. It feels like you are taking away some of J.D. Vance Walz's momentum, because then people are going to be able to make the argument of, oh, well, it wasn't a clean win because he was getting help.
Yeah.
I want Walz to be able to defend himself and defend his and Harris's policies on his own.
Yeah.
And to come back with not only come back with a fact check, but when you deliberately said that you wanted the candidates to fact check each other.
Yeah.
But also come back with attitude. But they made up for it a little bit with the next question, or maybe it was too quiet with Walz. That was not a good answer.
I personally feel like there was somebody in the air saying, like, get it together, because afterwards, like, they went after Walz. However, I will say the question that they went after Walz was just, why did you lie about being in Taiwan and at a specific time? And then the question after that was Vance defending his comments about Trump, and like, it makes him a martyr. If you are running for the highest order of the land, the highest position in the land, you should be able to defend yourself and you should be able to attack. Now, do you think, and this is my guess, is that they jumped into fact check because Walz clearly didn't follow up on that. He didn't follow up on any of the fact checking, and it was the same thing that happened with Biden, but CNN with Biden didn't jump in at all.
Yeah, but and again, that makes it even more obvious that like it makes the argument of, it's not a clean win even more valid to some people, because if he didn't fact check, you said that you weren't going to fact check, that you were going to rely on them, and then they don't, and then you still do it because they didn't. Not a great look.
Well,
so here's the thing.
Walz, with his like inconsistency of like when he was there, they said that he was there a few months after that or something like that.
Yeah.
You still would have felt the effects. You know what I'm saying? It's like culturally, like it still would have been very.
But it's more.
There still would have been.
But it's more about whether or not they can paint Walz as a liar. Like, the details don't really matter to the undecided voter. It's more about whether, he lied about this, so he's a liar.
He didn't necessarily lie, though. Like, he may have misremembered.
Well, that's
He is, after all, quite a bit older.
But
than
the undecided voter doesn't see that and think, oh, he just got the dates wrong. The undecided voter looks at it and is like, oh, he's dodging, he's lying.
No,
these debates will be
he was accountable though.
These
Like,
debates will be remembered by these little short sound bites that they will take from it. And at best, I think Walz was always going to be able to break even as a draw. This doesn't help. I think mainly. Oh, we're back. We will continue this later. Back at it. Here we go.
The CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun firearms. Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Laura, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly think local law enforcement.
Oh, classic.
To make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in second.
What if they steal a gun from an unlocked cabinet?
Kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible story.
Me too, Ray. Me too.
And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this.
She said Vance creeps me out.
Actually do it.
Oh, he's a skid mark of a human being, for sure.
Worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90%, and some of the statistics I've seen of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border,
there we go. Yep, bring it back
to the border.
Bring it back to immigration.
So that number, the amount of
I feel like you guys have probably put a hole in your bingo card at this point.
It's essential. It's xenophobia at its highest form of we need to arm the schools against the immigrants.
Oh my God.
It's immigration is their answer to every question. And
yes,
unfortunately it's popular
because it's immigrants that have been going in and shooting up the schools.
And the idea that if we can't take all guns off the street, then we shouldn't do anything is benign. Like I don't understand why that is so effective.
So we've got to make our schools safer, and I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat.
Wow.
Vance
way to try and
took one acting class.
Way to try and feign empathy. Oh my God.
One motherfucker film acting class online at that.
Awful.
Kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and I here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things
you
do to make a difference.
Thank you.
It's not infringing.
I'm so happy they're bringing in foreign gun laws into this conversation.
There, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking
Motherfucker.
Oh,
Said scaremonger, not fearmonger.
Oh.
Is that
So close.
We know there's countries around the world that their children aren't.
It's like,
practicing these types of drugs.
you know what? I'll bet that before they went out on stage, their campaign staff went up to them and was, oh, by the way, don't mention any of these terms. We're trying to make sure that this random podcast on YouTube.
Yeah. You see this
get it.
bingo card here? This is what you're going to take your notes on. We printed it out for both of you.
Mercy. It is awful, and I appreciate what Tim said actually about.
If you look at, they're trying to scaremonger.
Simply weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun.
What do you think's causing it?
I think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys,
Right, because
and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but
I have some very interesting things that I've learned about gun use in cities.
With school shooters, I've seen it. Look, the NRA got.
Did he just say he became friends with school shooters?
My shotgun was in my car, so I could visit him after football practice. That's not where we live today.
I don't know.
And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one, where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns.
Okay, that's a good pivot.
But I do think that this is one.
Damn near everyone in this country has a mental health issue.
Capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's a priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also
This is a 10-year plan, right?
New homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, on
a little shaky towards the end there.
The promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in.
No, you're right. We don't want to blame immigrants. We want to blame Kamala.
It's one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive.
This is what I can't stand. Walz talked about it on
increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to
again, the faculties of the vice president are
the office of the vice president.
It is a figurehead.
God, like I am so tired of
how many people do you honestly believe in this country still believe that the vice president has a vast amount of power?
I don't think anybody has ever believed it. I think that this is the first year where the vice presidency has been given any attention, and it's because the vice president, the current vice president, is one of the ones running now, and she was thrown in on short notice.
Also,
that's the only reason the vice presidency is so popular right now.
In terms of foreign travel, she wasn't able to travel that far from the Senate because she was always the tiebreaker. She had to be domestic for the most part.
Yes.
Where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be.
Yeah, what federal lands?
I do think that we should be opening up and building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out
illegal immigrants can't
for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens to be here.
Your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the.
I can see that worm at the back of your brain just being like, ah.
I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. But look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's again blaming and not trying to find a solution. I was going to ask though on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless
we go.
I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view.
I've been on reproductive rights for like the past 20 minutes.
There's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point,
which ironically, Angie, is where a lot of undecided Republicans are. Like breaking into the foreign lands. I mean, that's testy for for
reserve study that we're
for
happy
the
to share
undecided that you need to sway over.
on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what? A lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
Regulations. I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. That in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you, gentlemen.
I will consider a lot of this to be defense because he hasn't really gone for Trump much.
Yeah, he hasn't gone after Trump.
I don't think he needs to.
Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. It's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually.
Okay.
This is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of.
I hope Walz sees the opportunity here.
Kamala Harris's leadership. Prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations.
I will say he is doing what he needs to do in justifying. I mean, he is presenting a convincing argument to, undecided, uninformed people.
He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think it's
here it is.
President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care.
We need to fact check the hell out of that.
Oh my God.
I'm writing that down.
Cool.
Because I know for a fact that he didn't work. What he did was anything but bipartisan.
At the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants you. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that will be there. Look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kid would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained
As well-rounded as you could possibly make it.
Conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. And what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was
talk about revisionist history.
Right?
Which is governed.
He literally called John McCain enemy of the people for voting out the repeal of
Did
Obamacare.
enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now.
My God, that's probably the heaviest thing thus far.
And the question about this, of young people, whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what do you think the individual mandate's a good idea? I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You were asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on healthcare.
And I'm pick 480 there. Damn it.
Be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we
Yes, he did say that. You're absolutely right. If he has to create stories to get the media's attention, that's what he'll do.
It's there for you, because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying healthcare once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you, Margaret. I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret, let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. We're home.
I should have made a drinking game rule based on the word Minnesota.
Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it, Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families, go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take care of our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats too have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak for this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman. She has 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud.
Why does he keep saying that?
Being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area.
They're appeal to evangelical voters.
In your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care because look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is,
wouldn't you rather be pro-choice then?
Like they're choosing between
when you feel like you don't have options?
That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you.
Ray, I think you misspelled that word. I think you mean blessed.
Many things about the American family.
Unfortunately, chat and thinker or writer, I have to go.
So want to get your thoughts on
All right,
So,
thinker.
I'm not
We'll take it
gonna
from
be able
here.
to see the end of this, but let
That's
me know
okay.
I'm sure you'll let me know if anything crazy gets said.
We'll take it from here. You and I will meet for our first podcast debut on Thursday. We'll drop it Friday, and we will cover all the post-debate coverage over there. We'll do a little summary here, but then we'll follow up more in depth. You and I on the In Defense of the Fence podcast official debut episode on Friday.
We will see you. I hope to see everybody there, and thank you for tuning in. And can't wait to see you guys again.
All right.
We'll talk to you later, guys.
Till next time, thinker. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Back to this. What do we got?
That's the part of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this addition with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortages, we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide childcare options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket has some child
That's interesting. Interesting hearing a rebuttal here.
To the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised. Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening.
Now, this is an extension of the Biden administration's policies, an enhancement almost.
That leaves you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarship types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So
interesting. Calling out tariffs again, really have to solidify calling tariffs out for what they are.
Members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problems, especially in a state like Minnesota. We need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora, let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal.
Interesting.
Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Laura, first of all, I think that we're focused on.
All right, let's bring this PolitiFact window up.
Crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to
that doesn't look good,
because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief.
Yeah, that's good enough.
About those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration.
The Harris-Biden administration, that's new. Wow. Putting her at the forefront, not even just saying it's hers.
Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside the lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. That is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by 2 lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue.
Wow.
Have to agree on every
I did not know he was going to bring up RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. Are they really that much of a winner?
Persuade our fellow Americans, Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over
censorship. Again, Trump was the candidate who just recently said that he wanted ABC to lose their license, and he wanted to silence and imprison people who didn't agree. So.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election. And he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that
Yeah.
along with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election.
Yeah.
You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So
they do. You look at exactly what kind of influence Trump and MAGA have had. It's astronomical. We've never seen this kind of influence, at least in America.
in American history, a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret? Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done.
Oh,
50 years
my God.
Hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we'll win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have
He actually said Trump peacefully transferred power.
Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on.
Yeah, but she wasn't president.
If we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump, can he do it? And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is food ban. We've seen that.
Yeah.
That brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of agreement. This is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just say, did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind? And
I mean, that non-answer should tell you everything.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it.
It's appealing to the MAGA base, which I do not understand. If you were trying to convince the undecided voter, they know that he lost the election. So I don't see the harm in saying that he lost the election, because we've seen MAGA will not budge an inch for anything that Trump says, let alone what Vance says. So I don't see the harm in actually saying what actually happened is that Trump lost the 2020 election. I do not see the harm. If anything, it would bring the undecideds a little bit more over to the right to actually concede. I don't understand why they're going with this illogic.
Kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers should.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
In a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election? His vice president's not going to stand up. That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So, America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up.
Interesting.
We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is about, what time is it? It's about 10:39. I'm assuming on the East Coast. So I'm assuming that when they return, we're going to talk. We're going to do closing remarks. They will talk post debate, then they will go down and possibly interview the political pundits, the people who are going to be, the people in the spin room. They are going to be spinning like crazy. Oh, they literally say that we have 145 seconds of advertisement. So, how this is going so far, I'm interested in hearing how you guys are thinking, that what your opinions are. It's really, Walz was never going to go completely on the offense. We knew that going forward. Walz was never a big offensive guy. He's out of his element in the sense that he's better in the rallies because he can joke around, he can talk, he can like act like one of those like everyman guys. That's not what is needed on the debate. That's not what's needed right now. Vance has an opportunity here to water down Trump. He is Trump light, at least camera facing. And with him being camera facing, he has the opportunity to bring a little bit of realism to all of the outlandish lies that Trump has said. We know everything that Trump has said, he truly means, but Vance can spin it in a way that works and in a way that maybe might sound more appealing. And he is doing that. He is succeeding in talking about how just saying you have concepts of a healthcare plan actually means that you have a plan, because you're not going to dispel 900 pages of a healthcare plan. Well, we already know that they don't have 900 pages of a healthcare plan. They barely have 2. And the real reality of that is the best place to do that is on a debate stage. And Vance knows that, which is exactly why he's talking about a healthcare plan right now. So saying you have a concept of a plan, we know just meant that Trump had no plan. But eventually, if you keep pushing that long enough, you're going to give them time to actually be able to find a way to spin it. And Walz isn't doing the kind of offensive that I think he should. I think he did that partially. I think he could be a little bit more forceful. We barely have heard about things like Project 2025. Vance has always brought it back to immigration. I will give, the Republican side and the Trump campaign a lot of shit, but they have been relentlessly focused on the topic of immigration. That is their go-to mantra. That is their boogeyman. They will tie everything to immigration, and that is what J.D. Vance is successfully doing. Every time he pivots, it either goes back to the economy or immigration, and at some point, they're correlated enough to be the same issue. 1 second, 0 seconds. We are back from the debate. No, this football ad is taking a little bit longer. Nope, we're in space now. We're going to keep going. Okay. If you guys are here, thank you guys so much. Again, all proceeds that we give in tips and super chats, I appreciate every single one of them. Usually every single cent goes back into the channel. Tonight, though, every single cent is going to go into AmeriCares. If you see the rolling ticker tape down below, AmeriCares is a disaster relief fund for Hurricane Helene and all of the millions of people who have been removed from their homes, lost power, or even lost their lives. Over 100 people have lost their lives in Hurricane Helene. Anything you can contribute to help aid those families would be greatly appreciated. They will go straight to the charity right after this stream ends. And then follow us on Friday for the release of our debut podcast. I almost said debut album like we're the Beatles. Debut podcast of Thinker and myself on the In Defense of the Fence podcast, a podcast that brings in the fencers a little bit clearer vision of both sides of the fence so they can see both sides just a little bit clearer. We will be bringing that to undecided voters. Thinker will be going out and canvassing for under Vote Save America through Erie, Pennsylvania pretty soon. So hearing his journeys about him canvassing, hearing the voices of the undecided voters, that'll be interesting to hear, and we'll cover philosophical and political topics each time. We are back with the 2024 vice presidential debate. Yep, closing statements. Here we go.
So Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
I like this one better.
Senator Vance, CBS News, and most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with our Stars, I appreciate it. But the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you that that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something, not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. I have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that.
Interesting.
We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you.
Nicely put.
Your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say, I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm good for you. God bless you. Good night.
Senator Vance, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the vice presidential debate, the only 2024 vice presidential debate we will have. I have many thoughts. The spouses of Tim Walz and J.D. Vance are coming out. They are shaking hands with each other. They're showing a little, a modicum of decorum and cordiality. So, is that a word? I don't know. Goddamn liquor. We have a lot to talk about. I will save most of this. I will save you guys the headache of staying on with me for the night. Why am I so blurry? It's my camera again. Every single time. I need to figure that out. We will save most of it. We're going to save most of this for our podcast on Friday morning. We are going to talk about that in depth with Thinker when the podcast drops. So, first off, most important thing: 1, go blue, go Ohio State. That's first and foremost. Second of all, this was different than I anticipated. This was, I will say, I am impressed. I am impressed with Tim Walz. I think he did a great job, all things considered. I think the best outcome for Tim Walz was that he broke even with J.D. Vance. And I think to a modicum in most areas, he did just that. I will say there were some that I think J.D. Vance did pull ahead in some areas. I do think that I think J.D. Vance has a way of explaining, and he has a debate background. He has a media relations background. He's very good at turning things around. He's very good at, selling you a piece of shit and telling you that it's cake. And so because of that, he always comes in with knowing how to sound convincing. The problem is he knows how to sound convincing because a lot of the things that he didn't talk about, we talk about him being Donald Trump light. Well, he's also Heritage Foundation light because he's also not only run by the Heritage Foundation, he's also run by the far right technocrats in Silicon Valley. Primarily Peter Thiel. We didn't hear a modicum of that. And that is an indictment on both J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, mainly because J.D. Vance, if you heard about Peter Thiel, if you heard about the Heritage Foundation, if you heard about Project 2025, that is the critical indictment of the Trump campaign. Because by signing J.D. Vance onto the Trump campaign, you inherit all of that baggage, not the Laura Loomers, not the other people that Trump hangs around or puts around his campaign like Corey Lewandowski. It's Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, the corporate tax cut that he wants to do from 21% that he already cut from 35%. So that's a 14% decrease that he now wants to bring down to 15%. And so what do we know about the Trump campaign is that while he's in office, the very last thing he does before he leaves office after term 2 is get his corporate tax rate down as far as humanly possible. And so J.D. Vance not really talking about Project 2025, not talking about the technocrats, not talking about the Heritage Foundation. That is a win for J.D. Vance, and that is a failure on Tim Walz's part. Tim Walz had the opportunity many times to bring that stuff up, which we have seen through all the polls is wildly unpopular. He did not do that. Now, that is okay because Tim Walz did defend his position on a lot of things, and they showed a little modicum of respect towards each other, which the vice presidential debate usually does. We don't see a lot of rhetoric from the vice presidential debates. You didn't see that with Tim Kaine and Mike Pence. It's more strictly about policy. Now, that doesn't mean it's not fraught with lies, because it is. But in this case, it was more about respect, which can easily make it seem like what they're talking about is true. When you're questioning experts, when you're saying they're bringing up your hometown and saying that this is what you did for your hometown. By the way, if I put Minnesota on my docket for a drinking game, you wouldn't see me right now. You would just see a blank screen and me somewhere mumbling face first into my carpet right now, because I would be plastered. Vance, I noticed, jumped on the sympathy notes. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but Vance jumped on the sympathy notes a lot before Walz ever could. He would say, let me start off by saying my heart goes out to the people affected by Hurricane Helene, or my heart goes out to the people who have been affected by illegal immigration, leading Walz to follow up on them. And everybody knows if you're the second one giving your condolences, it's not as powerful. Vance knew that. Vance took advantage of that. Biggest thing is that Vance, being Trump light, being far right light on the debate stage, because he knows the people that they're going after is that last 15% of undecided voters. Vance trying to look like a moderate, one, is laughable, but at the same time, he does a good job at it. The problem is he's looking like a moderate, and it's only convincing to the people who haven't been paying attention, which at this point would be that 15% of undecided voters, because they're either weighing both their options, which I think is few and far between at this point, or they just have checked out and they're not going to check back in until 14 days before election day and try to figure out, because there are still people after these debates where they're doing focus groups and they're saying, well, I still don't know about her. I don't know about Kamala. I don't know about her policies. I don't know about JD Vance. Well, that's because you're not paying attention and you're not watching, because if you don't know at this point, they have very detailed policies all over the internet. They're all over. The problem is some of the people aren't paying attention, and they won't pay attention until election day, which technically, that happens in every election. It's just far more consequential now. Saying things like Democratic friends. I don't know if you caught that with JD Vance. He would say, like, my Democratic friends, trying to sway more people. And now JD Vance is probably one of the people, for undecided people who might lean a little bit left, bringing them over to the Trump side. He even said, almost like acting like a Buddhist, you don't have to like all of Trump's policies. You don't have to agree with him on healthcare, but come over to our side anyway, which is an interesting argument, because a lot of the things that you disagree with Trump on are pretty abhorrent. One question I wrote down was, do you think that CBS fact-checked Vance on Springfield because Walz didn't? I personally believe, they had these questions up all the entire time. They had them prepped. They were approved by both sides. CBS fact-checking JD Vance, and even more so fact-checking Tim Walz, I think is a mistake on their part. If they didn't learn anything from the ABC debate, it's that fact-checking can easily be manipulated on either side of turning the debate into a 3-on-1 attack. And the way that they did it, I think, was so abhorrent. I would be shocked if they didn't get criticism tomorrow for it. Now, I think they could spin it either way, because if you were looking at who won, I'm honestly going to say that I think it's a draw. I do think JD Vance had better debate skills, but I do think that Tim Walz held his own. I think it could have been an interesting campaign strategy by having Tim Walz say that he wasn't good at debates. He is historically not that great at debates. And he told Kamala Harris that when she asked him to be vice president. Now, going out and giving that press and leaking that press prior might have just moved the bar low enough to where he could just elevate it himself, should he want to. And he did. He was impressive. He really held to himself. He found his niche. After the first literally the first 60 seconds, he was off to the races and he was fine. JD Vance was a little bit better on policy, not saying that policy isn't a lie. He did question experts. He questioned the federal policies on things like government land or federal land, protected land. He questioned things like climate change. He questioned things on at the same time, he talked about the hurricane, and then he started saying that we had to deregulate certain parts of the government. That would include Project 2025, includes NOAA, to be able to track tropical storms and hurricanes and natural disasters, which is just mind-blowing. Let's see. Walz worked hard to talk to the everyman. He did. He worked very hard to talk to the everyman. And as much as JD Vance tried to be relatable, that was his biggest issue, is seeming relatable. Talking about his kids. He talked about his wife. talked about his upbringing. He tried very hard to seem relatable. The problem is people have seen JD Vance flip-flop so many times, and he finally made the argument that he flip-flopped because he was misinformed on Trump by the media, and he was angry at what Trump couldn't do because of Congress. Now that is very different, and it's really interesting to see how given enough time, people will find a way to spin anything. And it was only a matter of time before Vance found a somewhat digestible way to justify why you decided to call the person who you're on the ticket with America's Hitler, and thought he would, he literally called Trump an opioid. Let's not ever forget that. He called Trump an opioid in 2016, and even in 2020, blamed him for some of the lack of COVID response. Talking about Project 2025 is going to be a big thing. I almost wonder if it was a strategy on the Walz preparation team to not talk about that stuff and to only extend the airtime of Kamala's policies, because we knew this was going to be the only other debate, because Trump hasn't responded to Kamala's invitation for another debate. So this was the only other mass amount of airtime. So if they just told Walz, hey, this is going to be an extension of the Kamala policy explanation, lecture, seminar, TED Talk, whatever you want to call it, this is what you're going to do. Don't listen to anything that he says and just talk about her policy. And in that sense, he did a fantastic job. I will say that. I will also say he didn't feed into a lot of the bait that JD Vance gave him. JD Vance would ask him, well, he would ask him directly to answer a question. He would barely do it. He would barely nudge, and he would move on. I think it's a clear choice in terms of who won and who comes out better, because I don't think they're the same. I do think it varies so slightly. I think JD Vance won, but I don't think it helps the Trump campaign. I think they got the airtime that they needed, but so did Walz and Harris. Harris and Walz got the chance to actually discuss what they wanted to talk about, to extend the policy discussion. And to that credit, I think that they got the airtime that they wanted. And I think they swayed enough people, because it was a convincing argument. And Tim Walz does a very good job when he's comfortable feeling like the everyman, talking to people about their healthcare, talking to people about the stories about people who've gotten abortion, or immigrants who are here legally. Because let's not forget, the people who are from Haiti, who are in Springfield, JD Vance's own state of Ohio, are here on temporary protected status, otherwise known as legal. They are not citizens, but they are here legally. And what most of them are doing, the only reason why they're in Springfield to begin with, jobs. Springfield has created 7,000 more jobs. They've added to the GDP. They're on the payroll, which means they pay local, state, and federal taxes. They pay Social Security, and they pay Medicare. So what that means is they are contributing to the economy, and then they're on temporary status. So they're only on temporary status because the immigrants eventually have to go back, but they can't, because the countries like Haiti are fraught with gang violence, economic turmoil, and natural disasters. Hell, Hurricane Helene just went through Haiti. And not only that, the former prime minister of Haiti was in Puerto Rico because he couldn't physically go back because it was fraught with gang violence. These people do not have a home to go back to, but eventually the idea is that they will. And when they leave, who's there to take the 7,000 jobs surplus? It's going to be the American citizens. And so what you have there is a surplus in job creation, because that's what this economy is demanding with this temporary protected status. And also, they asked for more funds. There was a housing crisis in Springfield, Ohio, that JD Vance had a chance to discuss, but he turned it into an immigrant problem. And he's also even exploiting the death of a child who was accidentally killed by a Haitian on that program while driving. It wasn't a murder, which JD Vance called it, and the family has explicitly reached out to JD Vance and asked him to stop exploiting their son's death. But the idea that all of these immigrants are here illegally, he said, many times that there were 24 million illegals in here. That it's not true. The figure is much closer to 9 million. Yes, Trump bottlenecked immigration numbers, border crossings under his watch, but it wasn't that much lower than where it is with Biden and where it was with Obama. Yes, there was a 1.5% increase in wages and household income wages, but there was also a massive $8 trillion added to the deficit. And the reason why there was an increase in economic profit for a lot of American families under Trump is because Trump rode what was like 113-month bull run from the Obama era ever since the crash of 2008 and the mortgage crisis. It only started to turn recession-wise from manufacturing around 2019, not COVID, but 2019, before any of this started happening. And Walz called a little bit of that out, but I do think he could have done more. I'm starting to ramble. I know we have a lot to talk about, and I will save this for the podcast when it drops Friday. I will drop a notification for you guys. It will be dropped on Writer Reacts, and we will spread it out as far to as many channels as possible. We'll be on Spotify. We'll be on Apple Podcasts. We'll be on all your major podcasts, wherever you can get them. Guys, again, thank you. If you haven't already, tips, super chats, anything that you can contribute will go straight to AmeriCares, the disaster relief fund, to help people who have fallen victim to Hurricane Helene and all of the atrocious situations that they have to deal with now because of the natural disaster, and upending their life for, I would say, the better half of the past week. It has been horrendous in there. Our hearts go out to everybody down there who is dealing with this turmoil. I have family down there. I have friends down there. Please, anything you can contribute will be greatly appreciated. Most of all, I thank you guys so much for being here, witnessing history for the 2024 vice presidential debate between Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the podcast on Friday. Stay safe, stay happy, stay sober. Thanks, guys.